Planeswalkers. Tyler here, and I am bringing you another episode of Taps for Two with a good buddy of mine, MonoWhiteBorder on Twitter, aka Peter. Which one would you prefer to go by? I should have asked that before started recording.
Uh, Either one.
Fantastic.
If I can call you Tyler, then you can call me Peter.
Fantastic. So on today's episode, I wanted to talk about uh, something that both Peter and I are working on, but it's something that like I see you post about a lot, like you and uh, Lauren are like two of
Mhm.
my favorite people to go to for like really like off the wall edge case commander cards.
Yeah, Lauren's amazing. She has a fantastic Twitter as well.
I'll link her Twitter down in the description alongside yours. But yeah, so living up to his moniker of MonoWhiteBorder, uh, Peter and I have been building commander decks in paper where 100% of the cards in the decks have the white border.
Mhm.
Uh, Kind of unfortunate that we're both in Esper.
Yeah, right.
Because you're what, Dakon Blackblade?
Yeah, I don't think it's unfortunate. Esper's my favorite wedge. So, or is Esper a shard? But Esper's my favorite
Yeah,
shard.
Esper's a
So
shark.
I don't think it's unfortunate at all. The more Esper, the
I
merrier.
mean, it's alright. It's no Jund, but or Grixis, but
Jund
and
has green and red in it, so what's the point?
yeah. I mean, I guess it's one color off from being Grixis.
Mhm.
But yeah. So you're doing Dakon Blackblade, and I'm doing Bad Chromium, who the
Which
original
my character killed your character.
did Dakon kill Chromium?
Yeah, Dakon. There's a flavor text for a card. That it might be the Black Blade itself, but it references Gideon picks up a blade that's slayed an Elder
Yes,
Dragon to kill another,
the
and
flavor text on it's the Blackblade Reforged where it said it like in the
yep,
past it slew one elder dragon and in Gideon's hands it might yet slay another.
yep, it was Chromium that got slayed.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah,
God, this card's so bad.
yeah,
The only reason
uh,
I have a white copy of it is because I have a Chromium the mutable deck that's like zombies
mhm.
and enchantments, but this Chromium was originally the commander of it, and then I was like, why don't I love myself? And I got the good Chromium.
Good call. I do love the new Chromium as well.
Yeah,
They're far more
I like that he turns into
interesting
a human.
than the old one. The old one has Rampage though, right? So
Yeah,
that's
the
pretty
old
attack.
Chromium is 2 white, white, blue, blue, black, black, 7/7 flying elder dragon, Rampage 2, and during my upkeep, I pay the full Esper or I have to sacrifice him.
Right, right. Classic Elder Dragon text. I guess I can talk about what Dakon does. Dakon is 2 white, blue, blue, and a black for a star, and then has the ability Dakon Black Blades, power and toughness are each equal to the total number of lands you control.
I don't know why I thought he only cared about swamps.
Uh, that's that's his heir, um, Corlash. Corlash, heir
Corlash,
to Black Blade,
okay, I knew there was one
only
of
cares
them.
about swamps.
But yeah, so I kind of wanted to talk about today because by limiting ourselves to these white bordered cards, like, Commander, you've got access to like 99.999% of Magic's library. What if we severely limited ourselves?
Right.
And I wanted to talk with you about like kind of what like process you go through, like not even necessarily just brewing this deck, although I thought these decks would be like really good to kind of highlight, but like what the processes you go through when you're just like brewing a commander deck.
Hmm.
Because man, I've got 47 of them between being finished and being worked on, and I could use something that makes brewing easier.
I wish I had the magic button that just like did it for me. Um, and I really I don't. This week, actually, I sat down with another friend who he loves playing Magic as like a technical player. He's probably more technically proficient than me, but he just can't brew decks. And he really wants to be able to brew commander decks. So I sat down with him and we went through the process and um, yeah, it's weird. It's weird trying to think about how like I brew a deck because it's not something I actually think about very often. I kind of just I just do and then I figure out as I go along. It maybe it's just I've done it so much that it's like second nature anymore.
Do you use like Scryfall or EDH? Or well, I guess Scryfall is super helpful. Do you use like EDH Rec at all?
I really don't use EDH Rec, and that's partially because I just don't um, build a lot of decks that fit what EDH Rec does. So I use a lot of EDH Rec's like search functions to like find specific cards. Like um, I can't even think of an example of what I've done recently, but in EDH Rec you can sort by you can pull out a commander and you can find all the goblin creatures that are played in that commander's deck. So sometimes I'll do that, but usually my decks are I kind of just like to build them on my own, and then EDH Rec is kind of like a last step of did I miss anything interesting that I could use. Um, some examples of stuff that I have. So I have a SRAM deck, but it's aura based.
Okay.
I have a skeleton ship deck that is completely tribal skeletons.
I can't
I
wait to
have
check that one out.
I have cleric deck, but it's Bant clerics. It's not black white clerics. So like I find something. I'll find something, and then I'll find out how people aren't doing the thing, and then try and do it that way.
Okay.
Um, which and it's just it's more fun for me. I enjoy the creative process of deck building. Like here's this thing that is me. Like I created this thing, and I want to show the people I'm playing. Like look at what I found. Look at the research I did. That's my background. I studied history in undergrad. Um, I worked for a private investigation firm. I do research for the state now, and I just like doing research, which means that I like sitting down and just reading through card after card after card. I remember when I first started building, there were times when I would pick out a deck, I'd pick out a theme. So like my Hazazon Tamar deck is themed around deserts. So I went through every card in Naya colors and just looked for cards with sand or deserts or anything I could. So like it's a long process. Like that takes more work than just trying to build like a tuned deck because it's so many cards that you're looking for and you just add them all to the list. And then you end up with who knows how many cards that have some sort of sand or desert theme to them. And
that
and then you
went
have to cut it down from there. And then
that
the
went
cutting down process for me at least is more about just I want to make sure that I always have something to do. So like when I get to that working down to the 99, my emphasis is like I don't want to ever be at a point. It's not about me doing something big. It's about me always having something to do no matter how small it is. Like I never want to not be a participant in the game. Um, so that's usually that like my end goal isn't like I want to make a big splashy play. It's just I want to have cards that allow me to in the game try and get the most value out of them as possible.
yeah, no, because when we played together on it was Bento's stream, right?
Right. Hmm.
And you brought that dwarf deck and you're playing all these old dwarf cards. Like, I'm not gonna lie, like for the first few turns I was like, okay, I'm gonna focus on Miles and I'm gonna focus on Bento because whatever Peter's doing over there with these old dwarves, I don't think I need to worry about. And I actually became the most terrified of you because of just some of these old effects that
Right.
like who's that one that what is it, he swaps power and toughness?
Yeah, Dwarven Thaumaturgist.
God.
Um, who made the deck purely based on the fact that he has a wacky art and an activated ability. So I know, okay, an activated ability, I can use that to defend myself. Um, I told you on the stream, I built that deck when we didn't have Torbrand as a commander. I wanted to build mono red dwarves purely for the fun of it, and then it was about maybe 6 months later that Torbrand came out. I'm like, oh my god, that's awesome! Like, so before Torbrand, the deck was hardly functional at all. Like,
Who
I
commanded it?
I could barely deal any damage. And the deck is creature based. Like the goal of the deck is to deal damage with my creatures.
Who was the commander before Torbrand?
Balthor the Stout,
Okay.
which cares about. He's a dwarf.
He
He's the
cares
only
about
dwarf legend at the
barbarians.
time. Besides DePaula, I didn't want to build white dwarves because I really loved all the old red dwarves that like mountain theme. The white dwarves have a lot more of a vehicle component, which I really wanted that Tolkien style dwarf of like we're in the mountain, we're grumpy, we're sweaty, and we're digging for gold.
Nah, I feel
Um,
ya. I've I brewed my own mono red deck. It's got Balthor in it, but it focuses more on like berserkers and barbarians, and my commander is Lavisa Cold Eyes.
right? Yeah.
But like I wanted that flavor of just a bunch of people just barely on the edge of like sanity that just want to get out there and punch things. And so I'm
Hmm.
like going through every barbarian and every berserker, and there's not a ton of them and they're not great, but there's some fun ones.
Hmm. The intersection of my like personality, like the psychographics for Magic, my intersection is very much Vorthos mixed with a spike. So like I want my deck, I want when I look at my deck to like I look at all these cards and I love the arts on them and I love the flavor that they're conveying. Like the Marie Kondo method of deck building is what I call it, where if I look at a card and it doesn't bring me joy, I cut it. Which is why I barely play Soul Ring. I play Soul Ring in one deck because Soul Ring doesn't bring me joy when I look at it. But then it's mixed with my spike style, which is like I when I play my mono red tribal dwarves deck, I am still trying to kill you. Like I want to beat you with these horrible 1/2s and 2/2s. I don't know if that's actually Spike or Johnny, but whatever it is, it intersects with my Vorthos and just creates these decks that are like hyper um, flavorful builds and
No,
just
and
really
I have
out there, I
nothing.
guess.
I got nothing but respect for that because I'm actually currently like I wanted to play. I've been wanting to play crabs and turtles. I've been wanting to do like stuff that has a shell tribal, and
Yes.
I'm really sad Archelos didn't end up being Bant because I didn't have a Bant deck at the time. So I'm brewing Treva the Renewer, who's just a dragon who cares about life
Hmm.
gain and nothing to do with crabs or turtles, but she's in the colors and I like her. So
Hmm.
I've got this Treva life gain deck that's full of like I unironically have Fortress Crab and I have Meandering Tower Shell in this deck. A card so bad that when I got it, so I do a lot of trading on Deckbox, and the
Hmm.
guy that traded it to me asked me like, "Hey, listen, I'll send it to you, but I need to know why you want this card. I've had it for like a year now, and I've been trying to figure something to do with it, but it's so awful." And I was like, I'm
Hmm.
building crabs and turtles. And he goes, I respect that. And then he sent it to me.
Hmm.
But it's just when you're
Hmm.
trading with someone and you want a card that they think is so bad, they feel the need to have to ask you what your plans are with it. Like, I love that. I love playing with these bad cards and trying to make them good, which is why I love your Twitter and why I love Lauren's Twitter. Because like my method for deck building is almost like the opposite of yours in that I start on EDHREC and like I'll look
Hmm.
up my
Right.
commander and I won't like go into like specific deck lists, but yeah, I'll look through the list of here's the most common cards everyone's playing in these decks, and I'll be like, all right, cool, and I'll build something from that, and then I'll have like a frame of a deck, and then I'll just go
Exactly.
through Twitter and I'll go through your page and I'll go through Lauren's page and I'll be like, all right, what weird jank are they posting about? And like, oh, I could see that
It's
fitting in there, and I'll go cut it in, and
it's
yeah,
so hard to start from ground zero is the thing. And like it just takes so much more time to try and start from ground zero and you really have to have a reason that you want to build the thing. So like uh, my Ragnar deck, which is Bant Clerics. I wanted to build Bant Clerics because I wanted a reason. My friend has a Clerics deck that's black white, but he doesn't get to play all these horrible clerics from the old days of like tap 5 clerics, gain 10 life, and each cleric you control prevent the damage by 1, and like these cleric cards that aren't relevant really in EDH. And so it's like trying to force yourself to find a reason to play these bad cards, or like create a restriction that lets you play these black cards that gets us these bad cards, which gets us back to the whiteboarder thing, right? Like that is a restriction. I didn't know how restrictive it was going to be when I looked at it. That is a restriction that just cuts your card pool by what, like 90% or something crazy. There's
Yeah,
not that
no,
many whiteboarder sets.
you're almost limited to just like getting cards from like, I don't know, maybe a dozen sets. Like, because I've got my
Hmm.
Chromium whiteboarded list up right now, and I listed the specific edition of each card next to it, so I would know what to look up later. What's that? Ooh, and yeah, fifth edition, fourth edition, like basically fourth through ninth editions. Chronicles, um, yeah, and Chronicles are like the biggest ones that all my cards came
Right.
from.
Hmm. It's a ton of core sets because it's only cards that were reprinted got printed in whiteboarders. So like if there's a card that was, the perfect example of this is um, with Dakon. So the way I'm building it is I'm literally looking for a card a day. I'm trying not to do any research other than what one card am I going to add today? What do I need on my curve? What do I need as far as like what am I missing answers wise? I don't really have a strategy planned out yet. I think, and part of it's because I've built a Dakon deck before, so I'm really trying to make sure I don't just build the same exact deck. And I think
I
I
feel that.
decided that I want to go into a heavier Voltron style. I wanted to go into a heavier Voltron style because my deck on deck I have currently is basically like a control deck, and it's miserable to play against because I just control the game until no one has a board or anything to do. I play Dakon. I don't even equip him with haste. Like if you kill him, I will just recast him with the 30 lands I have out on the battlefield, and I'm just gonna keep going until you run out of cards. And it's miserable. If I do well, it's miserable for people to play against, and so I rarely ever play it. So I wanted to do a more traditional Voltron strategy with this deck on list. But the problem is Mirrodin's not a whiteboarder set, and Mirrodin's when equipment comes out, and not too long after Mirrodin, equipment, or we go away from whiteboarder. So that means there's not many equipment. That's what I posted about today. There's like barely any equipment that are halfway decent. You have like Leonin Bola, Luxodon Warhammer. Uh, there's a foreign whiteboarder Swiftfoot boots. Like
Loxodon Warhammer's not too
that's the
bad.
equipment that you have access to. Oh yeah, Luxodon Warhammer got on the deck, but I'm gonna have to find a different way to get those Voltron strategies. So I found a card like Rune Sword that's a very
I
old
did see
style
that one
equipment,
where it's an artifact,
right?
but it's like tap ability. Kind of. It's an
Yep.
old school, like it's equipment but not equipment.
Exactly. Um, so I think that's what I'm gonna kind of lean into with this deck is trying to find, okay, here's all these weird ways to buff a creature, similar to how a Voltron deck feels, but not using equipment because I just don't have access to them really in my card pool.
Yeah, and not to mention like when you're limiting yourself in that way, like your perception of what's a good card and what's a bad card gets shifted dramatically because I think I had told you
Yeah.
in this Chromium deck all f- I have 5 because I think there's 6 of them total because they're Circle of Protection artifacts.
Hmm.
I have all 5 Circle of Protection enchantments: COP black,
Hmm.
blue, green, red, and white. Cards I never like, maybe like 2% of the, no, well, I guess that with 100 cards I can actually point out like maybe 10% of this deck are cards that like I've seen printed recently or have been good enough to like stand the test of time. But like,
Right.
yeah, like 90% of this deck are cards I've never heard of and cards I've never played before. Like, I'm playing Disruptive Student,
Hmm.
who's Teferi. I want to point that out.
Yep.
Canonically is Teferi. I'm playing uh, Disruptive Student and Avatar of Hope and Abbey Gargoyles alongside Counterspell, uh, Soul Ring, and there was another one in here that I was like really happy. Oh, Blue Elemental Blast.
Right. I actually thought about putting that in my list for today, but it's gonna have to wait for another day if I consider it.
I've got Giant Crab alongside Gravedigger.
Hmm.
Uh,
Oh, the creatures are not great.
they're
The
super.
creatures are not
I'm
great.
I'm running in this Colossus of Sardia, which
I don't even know. I know a lot of cards. Is that the one that like it is the only creature that can attack?
no, Colossus of Sardia is 9 mana for a 9/9 artifact creature with trample. It does not untap during your untap phase. Pay 9 to untap it. Use this ability only during your upkeep.
Oh, jeez. So it has. Oh gosh.
What is it?
It's not quite as bad as cumulative upkeep, right?
Right, because
You
you
get
don't
to
have
keep it
to
if you
do
can't
it.
pay.
Uh,
That's a pretty low hurdle to try and clear.
but yeah, but there were some cards in here that like I'm really happy that I found because like they're cards that I kind of want to use in the future. Like, I only have their names and I can't remember what any of these do because why would I remember them? Um, Ashen Powder. I also found out there are two separate cards, one called Ashes to Ashes and the other called Dust to Dust.
Right. Dust to Dust gets 2 artifacts.
Yeah, Ashen Powder, 2 black, sorcery. Put target creature card from one of your opponent's graveyards into play under your control. Just reanimate something from an opponent's graveyard.
Did you also notice digging through the Esper white border cards that there are a ton of steal effects in white border? Like you could legitimately make a decent white border like I'm gonna steal all your stuff deck,
I do run a couple of them. I've got Control Magic in here.
right?
I've got Animate Dead in here. I don't know if we count that. I've got
Yeah, no, I definitely count it.
I've got Abduction. That was another one that I couldn't believe I got access to. Was Animate Dead.
Yep. Hmm.
Abduction. I have in here Brainwash.
Hmm.
Uh,
Annex is a card I just added, which takes a land.
I did see that one. I'm trying to remember what Kismet does.
Oh, that is the one that everything ETB's tapped for
Okay,
your
never
opponents.
mind. Well, I have it.
So artifacts, creatures, lands. It's in there.
The most
Very good.
of all of the like I also want to point out my basic lands are also white bordered. Um,
Of course, yeah.
of all the cards in this deck, the one I am most excited about and it's a card that I'm gonna try and work into more of my decks. Is Booby Trap,
Right. Yes.
which is let me pull it up real quick. Oh nope, not that. Booby Trap, 6 mana artifact. When it comes into play, name a card other than a basic land. Whenever target opponent draws any cards, he or she reveals those cards to all players. If any of those cards are the named card, sacrifice Booby Trap and it deals 10 damage to that player. I just think that's
Which,
funny.
well, and the spiky side of me, that like the Vorthos side of me would put this in a deck, right? Of just like, wow, that's cool. Like I'm setting up this trap, and as soon as you hit the wrong pressure plate, the whole thing goes off and blows up in your face. And
And
then the spike side of me sees it, and it's like I have perfect information of what my opponents are playing now. Like
because
pay
yeah,
6 mana,
so
don't name a card that anyone would play.
it's been oracled. You have to choose a target opponent when it enters play.
Right.
So you pick one person and you name a card other than a basic land card, and now they're just revealing every card that they draw. And you're right. You like on one hand you're like, well, what's Evolving Wilds. A lot of people play Evolving Wilds. I'm gonna name
It has to
Evolving
be a
Wilds.
non-land. Soul Ring's the like go-to.
No, it has to be other than a basic land.
Oh, neat. So you can. Oh, okay. So you can name. That's yeah.
You
That's
can
good.
name utility lands, but you're
That's
right.
good.
Soul Ring is probably a better one. You name Soul Ring, or like, all right, I'm playing against you. You've got this Esper deck. Okay, I'm gonna name Red Elemental Blast.
Hmm.
Um, you're now just revealing every single card you draw until someone gets rid of Booby Trap. You don't
Right.
get to be sneaky anymore.
I have a Nebuchadnezzar deck that's based around knowing my opponent's hand. Nebuchadnezzar is 3 blue black for a 3/3 that has pay X, tap him, target opponent reveals X cards at random. You name a card, target opponent reveals X cards at random, and if they reveal the card, then they discard that card. So effects like telepathy that let me know every card in your hand are amazing for Nebuchadnezzar, and Booby Trap would be another great card that lets me have perfect information. Now, my Nebuchadnezzar deck's a little bit more on the spiky side, less Vorthosy, but I have a second Nebuchadnezzar deck that's like a mini games deck. And so Booby Trap's a really nice option that appeals to my Vorthos of I have this mini game of every time you flip a card over, like, is it going to be the right card? Are you going to die? Or um, alternatively, my spiky side still gets to make a strategic decision using that card.
Do you
Uh,
run Urza's glasses?
Absolutely. I run it in the good version. I run Urza's glasses. Um, yeah, and I love that card. And it's also in whiteboarder. We could run it in these decks.
Fantastic. Because isn't it just tap, look at it? Because it's just tap, look at your opponent's hand. But I think like the original
Right.
printing of it, it didn't tap. You just paid 0 mana to do it, and so it was
It
like,
was a
we need to
I
stop
believe it
this.
was a I believe it was a mono artifact, which is the old wording. So the famous one is Candelabra of Tanos, I believe, is a mono artifact. So people when they read it, it doesn't say tap, so they think they just get infinite mana. But mono artifacts, as a part of their card type, tap to use them.
Oh,
So Urza's Glasses has always tapped, but it didn't read like it always tapped, which is the whole reason they made that change in the first place.
well, here we go. I'm learning something. I didn't know that.
Right.
Because I just
I
pulled it up on Gatherer, and the
mhm.
image that is on Gatherer is, yeah, Glasses of Urza, 1 mana, mono artifact. All it says is, you may look at your opponent's hand.
Yep.
But then, yeah, over
Yep.
on the side, it's type artifact, card text, tap, look at target opponent's hand. Yeah, I didn't
Hmm.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's just an old feature of Magic, and it's something that you have. It's something you learn when you're spending as much time just digging through random cards as I do. You just learn these random things like what does mono artifact mean? What does world enchantment mean? These like things that aren't referenced at all in modern Magic, but they still exist in the game, which is kind of the beauty of Magic, right? Is like
Right.
it's the beauty and the fault, right? On one hand, Magic has all these weird cards, and how do they like these old weird cards? How do they interact with modern design? On the other hand, you can also look at them as Magic has all these mistakes, and they have to live with these mistakes forever. Like you
Magic
don't
was a
get to just
mistake. Anyway.
push them under the rug.
What is that? That's the anime was a mistake attributed to what's his name? The guy that does all the really nice the Ghibli movies.
Oh,
Uh,
I feel bad not knowing his name.
but you know who I'm talking about.
Yes, I'm familiar with Studio Ghibli.
But
Ghibli,
like
Ghibli.
their head anime or their like director or whatever. Like I don't know if he actually said it, but the joke is just anime is a mistake and it's attributed to him. But yeah, no,
Do you
I feel
remember?
like that old wording is kind of what breaks a lot of cards, and that's what makes Commander even more fun. Is finding
Hmm.
these old interactions and combining them with cards that they obviously didn't have any idea they were going to print in the future. I'm
Oh yeah.
trying to think of a good example I've got on my 26 plus finished decks. Um, but I can't. Anyway. But yeah, it's
Something like Glint Nest Hawk, which is one CMC creature that you play and return an artifact to your hand, but it's a 2/2, which when it was printed was designed to be like, oh, here's a really efficient, like cheap creature you can have. But they print Tashar, and now it's one of like the best creatures in a Tashar deck.
Oh, the Glint
Um,
Hawk.
yeah. Um, I mean, and along with that, like Core Skyfisher and White Mane Lion, these cards are like awesome in Tashar decks, and maybe not White Mane Lion so much. I don't for sure know what Tashar decks are doing, but I know they play Core Skyfisher, for example, and they're really good cards in Tashar decks.
I know
Um,
there's like a Peregrine Drake that makes it like super easy to go infinite by
right.
bouncing it and tapping a bunch of lands in response and replaying it,
Oh yeah.
netting mana each time. And
I mean, Palagron with the bounce lands is, you pay if you have a Palinchron and what is it, 7 lands, and one of them's a bounce land that taps for 2, you're good to go. You're golden. You have infinite mana of whatever colors you want.
there's God, I just had it on the tip of my tongue. Um, oh, like I guess the really simple one is how long has Basalt Monolith been out?
Right,
And then we get like Zerta, who you
right.
don't even need to try, just those two interacting. Congratulations, you have infinite colorless mana.
Hmm. Oh, or the perfect one that I'm really excited for Mono Red Dwarves is Magda
That
combos
I
with.
was meaning to ask about her earlier in regards to your dwarf deck. Like, is she going in the 99? Is
Right.
she replacing Torbrand? Like, does she mess up that deck at all?
I don't. I think I'm leaving Torbrand as the commander, and here's my logic. So Magda has infinite combo, an infinite dwarf combo. It's Magda, Dwarven Blood Boiler, and Relentless Assault. So Magda says whenever a dwarf becomes tapped, you get a treasure. Dwarven Blood Boiler lets you tap a dwarf to give um, target dwarf +2/+0. And Relentless Assault says pay 5, untap all your creatures. There's an additional combat phase, I think. And so if you have 6 dwarves, you make infinite number of treasures. But I think I'm still leaving Torbrand in as the commander just because Torbrand synergizes with every single dwarf in the deck. And so while Magda has the higher ceiling, her floor is a lot lower, which is something that I prioritize. Like, to go back to what I said earlier, like my goal when I sit down to play Magic is to play Magic. I'm not trying to win a game really quick. I'm not trying to combo out. I want to be interactive. I want to survive, and I want to always have something to do. And Magda, there is a chance that I will just play out my 2/2s and 1/1s, and they will be really bad creatures. I will never attack with them, and then a board wipe will happen, and they die, and then I have no cards in hand. And that's not the experience that I'm looking for. So the 1% of the time where I get an infinite combo, she's just not. I don't think she's gonna be good. I'll probably try her out in the command zone because she's a ramp source, which is a cool thing. But that dwarf doesn't have, or that deck doesn't have a great top end. So if I can make a bunch of mana, well, what's it gonna do? Probably not a whole lot.
Because yeah, Magda kind of needs a whole bunch of dragons or powerful artifacts in order to like
Yeah,
really reach full potential.
yeah. And these are Tolkien dwarves. They don't like dragons. If you've seen The Hobbit, if you haven't seen The Hobbit for some reason, I won't spoil it for you.
I unironically and legitimately enjoyed all three Hobbit movies,
Oh yeah, we watched them recently. We watched them recently, and no, they were perfectly entertaining.
and that's all I want from. Like, I understand why people don't like them. Like, you didn't need to take one book and stretch it into three movies. I don't care. I just like the 1998 American Godzilla that like everyone knows is bad.
The one with Matthew Broderick.
Yeah, that
I love
movie
that
is.
Godzilla. I
It's what
love that
it's
Godzilla
what
so
got
much.
me into Godzilla, and so
Yeah,
it's one of those things that like I understand why people don't like it. I understand it's not amazing. I personally love it, and like it. I remember because it was the first Godzilla movie I ever saw. I remember seeing that and then going to Blockbuster and seeing Godzilla 2000 Millennium and thinking, "Oh, cool, Japan made their own." Thinking that that it was Godzilla and the Japanese Godzilla,
Right.
not
Right.
Godzilla and what America did to him. So
Yeah.
like
I mean,
I love like movies like that, and it's just like I'm here for entertainment. I don't need to think deeply.
it's the beauty of being like young and naive, right? Is that you can just purely enjoy something. You have no preconceived expectations. It's just, oh my gosh, look at this giant radioactive iguana rampaging through New York City. That's sweet. And I mean, to bring it back to Magic, that's the same thing that eventually every Magic player cracks that glass ceiling of they can't they can't look at Shivan Dragon anymore and say this card is so awesome. I got to play this card. It's absolutely broken. Like
I'm
eventually
trying to cross
that
that
happens
bridge
to
with
everybody.
Sarah Angel. Because part of me still wants to say, like, because I've come to terms with there's cooler dragons, but like
Hmm.
my mind every time, because I'm trying to kind of in the background brew a white black angel deck around Lisa or Lisa or whatever,
Hmm.
however her name's pronounced, and just I keep going back to like Sarah Angel. It's Sarah Angel. She's good, right? Like, and it's like she's not bad. She's not good, but
Well,
White
and
has White has other
power
issues.
power is all contextual, right? So you can contextualize it with your opponents, and then Sarah Angel likely isn't going to compete with whatever your opponent's playing. But you can also build a restriction where Sarah Angel's the best creature that you have access to. Like, your restriction could just be straight up, I am not going to play a single creature better than Sarah Angel. Like Sarah Angel will be the best card in my deck. And then you get to be excited because it's like, man, I really hope I draw my Sarah Angel this turn because I
Here
could
comes
really
my
use the
bomb,
best
Sarah
creature in my deck.
Angel.
Right, right. And maybe it won't, actually do anything. Like you'll play it and it'll die, and maybe that's not fun for you. Um, I'm someone who, like I said, it is. I put a card in my deck because I like looking at it and I like seeing it and I like casting it, and that means that I play a lot of cards that are really bad. A perfect example is in my Skeleton Tribal deck. There's a ton of cards that are super bad. Um,
The
I
commander
recently
of
did a
that deck
post.
is Skeleton Ship, right?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
good.
Which I literally was in a card store. I saw Skeleton Ship. I thought this art is amazing. I want to buy this card, and the deck just evolved from there. I went back home. I bought every single skeleton creature that I could, and it cost me $15. I bought every cheap card with skeleton art, and then I just slowly just continued to add cards over time. So often I think we get caught up in, and it's something that I'm working towards this year of building the deck and getting a final finished polished product at the very end. When you don't have to do that, you can just buy a deck that's $10 and play it. And if you have a good play group that like can balance to your play level, so you can actually enjoy the deck and play it, and just slowly increase it by finding new cards. I don't worry about finding every sweet interaction when I am excited to put a deck together. I just I
No,
sit
I
down.
feel it.
Here are the cool cards I want to play, and I will find more cards. I will stumble upon them. I will research them. I will add them to my, you know, TCG player cart. I'll go down to my local game store and ask if they have the card. Like I will find cards to add to this deck and make it better. But for now, I'm just going to enjoy these 20 cards that I really am excited to play with.
No, I feel it. I've got in my finished collection. I have a Pauper Commander deck. I've got it's blue black
Hmm.
pirates. It's helmed by Ramirez de Pietro.
Fantastic.
It's Pauper Pirates, and the whole deck costs maybe $20,
Hmm.
and they're all commons, and all the cards in it. I have some way to tie it back to being pirate themed, because
Right.
like a lot of the pirates from like Ixalan, like a lot of the good ones are like at uncommon, but like I've got it open here. I have Cold Water Snapper, the giant turtle, because it's like I could see pirates riding it or like landing on it, like they thought it was an island.
Yes.
I've got
Those are the best when you have a really bad card and like you're explaining to your friends at the table,
why
you're
it's here.
explaining why the card works. Like they're like, "Okay, that's not pirate themed and it's not good. Why are you playing it?" And you're like, "No, no, no, no. You have to understand that if you're a pirate, this might be land." So you're like, "Land ho," and then you run into it and it's a turtle.
I've got Killer
And then
Whale
it's
in
like,
here
"Okay,"
because I've got Killer Whale and I've got Hammerhead
which is
Shark in here because those are threats that a pirate would face out in the ocean.
I really need to get a killer whale because orcas are my favorite animal and the art on that card is really cool.
Skullduggery, Pirate's Cutlass, Perplex. Counter target spell unless its controller discards his or her hand. You know,
Right?
it's sword point diplomacy. It's like you're either gonna lose your hand or you're gonna lose the spell. Which do you want? Uh,
Oh, so the feeling of casting the card makes you feel like a pirate.
exactly.
I
Golden
like
Egg
it.
is in here because you know it's treasure. Typhoid
Hmm.
rats are in here because you know you probably got rats in the belly of your ship.
Yep.
Omen of the Sea is in here, obviously.
Yep, it's the sea.
Uh, the the one I was most proud of is it came out in Theros Beyond Death, the Fruit of Tezaris. It's the black card of like it's a guy mostly in shadow and he's eating this like fruit from the underworld. It's
Right, I know what
scurvy,
you're talking about.
or it's preventing scurvy. And so I love this deck because I can come up with some bizarre explanation for every card in it. Because like I put in every pirate and every pirate themed card I could do, and I was like, cool. I still need like 40 more cards, and or like I've got four color Omnath, who a card so
Mhm.
powerful, it's banned in standard, it's banned in brawl.
Right,
Um, this deck I have is Landfall Defenders. Like I run
right.
a bunch of walls in this thing. Aether Membrane, Vent Sentinel, Assault Formation, Huatli, the Sun's Heart, Rolling Stones,
Hmm. I
and
love Rolling Stones.
no, I love taking like these like popular cards and popular uh commanders and then just like what is the weirdest route I can possibly go with these?
Yeah, and that's another that brings up a good point too of there is something really fun when you can take an extremely powerful commander and give them a restriction so like harmful that it brings them down to like it brings their power level so far down. So like the deck I did, I built I wanted to build Psy Master Thopters when he came out, which is 2 blue. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, you make a 1/1 Thopter. You can pay 1 in a blue, sacrifice 2 artifacts to draw a card. He's a 1/4, and I just built him as straight um, Kaladesh tribal. So I only use cards that thematically um, were set in Kaladesh. So Kaladesh Aether Revolt, and there's a couple core sets with Kaladesh cards in them. And that, because Sai is like baseline a certain amount, like he's a certain quality baseline because he gives you creatures and he draws you cards. So you're always going to be able to play and do stuff. It was able to bring the power level of the deck down, and then it became, finding weird ways to make all these cards work. And the deck was really cool. It could win via an Aetherflux Reservoir or just swinging with a bunch of Thopters, but I had zero removal. There was no board wipes. There were a couple counter spells and bounce spells, but like it was blue in the truest form of if you stuck a permanent on the battlefield, chances are I was not going to be able to deal with it. And fingers crossed that I could block it with some Thopters. But it's hard with certain commanders are really difficult to figure out a way to do that. You got to be really creative with your descriptions or your restrictions because like Tulane or Corvold are just so inherently powerful
I do have a
that
Corvold deck, and
I
it
don't.
is Jund Aristocrats, and I do get targeted when it
Yeah,
comes out.
yeah. Corvold is a really scary commander, um, and finding I don't know how I would build Corvold because I really if there's one thing I don't like being the arch enemy at the table. Like I really love flying under the radar, sitting back the whole game, and then trying to steal it at the very end. Um, so I don't know how I would ever be able to pull that off with Corvold.
I think I saw Sheepwave, Megan, talk about it. It
Hmm.
might not have been her, but I saw someone talking about for decks like that, like sometimes the commander is more terrifying than the deck itself. So
Right.
having a backup commander, which
Hmm.
I've debated doing because I've got Prosh in the 99 of the Corvold deck, and I realize Prosh is powerful, but I think Corvold is feared more. And so I've debated pulling Prosh out of the 99 and keeping him like in the deck like next to Corvold, and depending on who I'm playing with, either putting out Corvold or swapping him out for Prosh.
Yeah, and Prosh is great because if you sit down at a table and just go like, "I'm not playing food chain," everyone's like, "Oh, okay, Prosh is cool. Yeah, that's totally fine." Um,
And then on the reverse
and
end
then
of that,
because I've experienced that firsthand.
but then
Alternatively,
on the reverse end of that, I've then got like this mono green deck that I sit down with and it's like, hey, I'm playing Ovaya Pashiri, Sage Lifecrafter, so it's artifacts.
hmm
Worm Coil Engine, Vorinclex.
right.
Yeah, this is the deck I got Vorinclex for, Darksteel Colossus, Phyrexian Triniform. Like, this is not a deck that you. This also is the one that runs the Karn and Microsynth Lattice lock. And so it's like,
Mhm.
that's not a deck that comes out at casual tables.
Right, right. Yeah, I definitely have those decks. I put together a Lavinia knowledge pool deck that has
Um,
yet to see
oh yeah,
one
no,
game.
my
I've never
Shabrin
played a
or
game with it.
my Shabraz and Braylon deck run Lavinia and Knowledge Pool for that exact reason.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm not in very many games where it's like, hey, we all want to be mean to each other, so I just never play it. Um, yeah, I have just a collection of decks that are decks I built without like restricting myself. So I just built them to maximize something. So my Dakon Blackblade deck is built to maximize just controlling the game. Every card in the deck uh, assists that control plan, and then the win con is hitting you with Dakon. Nebuchadnezzar's discard. Um, I have the Lavinia Knowledge Pool deck. They're just decks that are so miserable to play against that I never play them, but I love having them
Yeah,
because
because
I still follow the pattern of I only play cards in those decks that I like to look at. So every time I look at them, I get to just see these cards. I'm like, oh, that's a really cool card. That's a cool card. I love this card. I love this art. It's the reason I built Lavinia was because I wanted a deck that got to play Hollowed Ground, um, which it's a just this landscape art that has this small little shack in it and the lights on, and then it's just in this like snow covered forest. It's like this beautiful scene, and I just really like looking at it.
no,
And then also that deck just is runs knowledge pool and Lavinia and is really mean.
no, I like having decks that are at a bunch of different power levels. Like I'm currently like it's gonna be like 100% proxied, but I'm currently putting together a CEDH deck just to have it on hand. I'm doing
Yeah.
Grixis,
Hmm.
Rogrock, and Silas Turbo Ad Nauseum, and
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
that deck will not see play 99% of the time. But I have friends that like there's Josh and Bento who play on this like higher level, and I want to be able to sit down at a table with them and be like, all right, I'm coming up to your guys' level, as opposed to sitting down at a
Yep.
table with them and going, hey, I'm playing Bant, Turtles, and Crabs. I need you guys to bring it down a peg.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
That's something I've run into for sure. Of like, I think we often focus on, oh, come down to my power level. Like come down to my power level, or because if you're playing a low power level deck, you're theoretically not going to ruin anyone's fun, right? But I found that is not true at all, because I've sat down at tables where I'm playing tribal skeletons and the rest of the table's playing, decks with combos in them, and they're really linear decks that are hard to interact with. And tribal skeletons, the interaction is limited to nautical puns and skeleton themed cards. So I don't have great interaction.
I can't wait
I have
to.
like capsize as my best removal spell.
We're bringing you on
And
Commander Coliseum at some point, and if you don't play skeletons, then I'm going to retroactively remove every mention of you from this channel.
that's fair. I understand that. I won a game with my skeleton tribal deck recently too. So watch out. It's not that bad. Um, but it's bad enough that I played against a table and they were playing these linear decks, and it made it really unfun for them because it turned into a 3-person game because they could ignore me completely. I wasn't a threat at all, and no one likes playing in a 3-player game, right?
Yeah.
So it's definitely worth it to make sure that, like, for me, I built some decks that were higher power level. I have a Grenzo deck that's a linear combo deck, and like it's nice to have that to say, hey, you guys want to play a game at a higher power level where we're comboing each other out and no holds bar, and I can offer that to them now rather than being like, well, I'll sit here with my skeleton tribal and you guys have fun and I'll just play my skeletons. And it makes a much healthier play experience and play environment when I can go up to their power level, but they can also come down to mine. When you're going in both directions rather than just always going down.
Right. Anyway, I think we're coming up on time. That was just a pleasant conversation about deck building and
Right.
weird cards. And
Yeah, I feel like we were all over the map.
and you know what? That's what I kind of hope. Like a lot of these, like if you watch like a lot of the early ones that Andrew and I did, where we tried to rigidly stick to this is the topic, this is all we're going to talk about, it gets kind of awkward. Because
Right.
like we'll say something and it's like, all right, well that's all we have to say on that topic. Have to come up with something more. So yeah, no, this was fun. Just talk about like weird cards that we like to play in Commander and how we build decks and how those weird cards affect how we build decks. But
Yeah.
anyway, thanks for joining me for this hour of talking about sweet garbage. And
Thanks for having me. I love garbage.
dude, garbage is the best. That's why I build so
Yeah.
many Commander decks, because I can never bring myself to like optimize one fully. If I get a new idea, it needs to be its own deck.
Well, and it's not socially acceptable to surround yourself with like trash and like live in a dumpster like Oscar the Grouch. But if you surround yourself with jank commander decks, it's really the same thing. Just surround yourself
Exactly.
with garbage.
Anyway, I have been Tyler, joined by my wonderful guest Peter. I'll be linking his Twitter page, MonoWhiteBorder, down in the description of this video. Is there anything else you wanted to plug before we wrap things up?
Now, if you find me on Twitter, that it has all the content I made. I am working on my blog this year is going to focus on a single white deck that I'm working on throughout the year. But you'll find that link attached to my Twitter profile if you're curious about all that, and I'll share the post on Twitter and everything. So Twitter's the catch-all for me.
Awesome. Well, y'all know the deal at this point. Give us a like, give us a sub, shoot us a comment. What kind of weird Commander jank do you like to build around? And ring the little bell so you never miss when we upload. But I have been your host Tyler, and I will catch y'all later. Peace.